If there's one thing you need to know about me, is that my favourite part of the hobby is coming up with colour schemes. Which is why I was super excited that Parabellum sent me their casual play box, which was part of their season 2 organised play. Inside this box, there are the 3 models that were part of the community-driven choice as part of the Living World called Project 8. Project 8 was the community's decision about what faction was going to be coming out next. We had 3 choices. We had Hell, the Sellswords, or as the community like to call them, the Dogs of War, and my personal favourite, which were the Sorcerer Kings. Ultimately, the Sorcerer Kings was chosen by the community, which I'm super excited about. However, we won't be painting that model in this video because I want to try and tackle the Sellswords model because it's the one model that I don't have a good idea or picture of how I want to paint it. And I thought this is a good chance to show you how I talk through or walk through creating a colour scheme for a miniature. So grab a cup of tea and let's head over to my painting desk. Coming up with colour schemes might be my favourite part of the painting process, but my least favourite is building miniatures. Usually my partner is the one that builds up all our miniatures, but this time I'm putting them together and I am incredibly thankful for the Parabellum resin kits because they make building them a breeze. There was a little bit of flashing I needed to clean up, and the only model that I had a little bit more of a problem with was the Sorcerer King model, which had a few resin points that I had to saw off. It didn't take me long at all to put these together, and if you would like to pick up some of the resin characters or models from Parabellum, you can use my links in the description or the code Sorceress10 to get 10% off your first order. Can we take a moment to appreciate these Artisan Guild models that I primed up for my partner? Because the details on these are incredible. I'll leave a link to the My Mini Factory pack in the description. Normally when I think of mercenary groups, the colour that I associate with them for their cloth is red. But in this case, I'm not going to go with red because that's what my partner's 100 Kingdoms force uses as their main cloth colour. So I'm trying to think of other colours that a commander or a very wealthy person in a mercenary company might use. And so when you think of that historically, another colour that was regarded very wealthy is purple. But because purple is naturally quite a dark colour and therefore is not overly vibrant or luminous, I'm thinking I might morph it more towards red violet, kind of like how I have done on this Keyleth cape, where I have purple but the highlights are more red violet. And so that's what I'm thinking for his cloth pants there. So if we take a look at the colour wheel is set up that you can set what your main colour is going to be. So let's just simplify and say we're going red violet. We can have a look and see what the complementary is, which is green yellow, or split complementary, which would be yellow green and yellow. Do also have the option of them going into a triad, which means that you use colours that are equal distance around the colour wheel. So I could use blue, green and yellow, orange. So in any case, I'm thinking that in the armour I might add a little hint of a yellow or a green into just the shadows to give a little bit of vibrancy and interest to the armor, but not necessarily make the metal green or yellow. Just add a little bit of almost environmental colouring. In terms of the fur, I have a few options that I could go for. Now, I could take it more of sort of like a traditional fur colour, but lean it towards like a orangey yellow toned, or I could bring in a little bit of like a blue green undertone, kind of like how I've done previously. I've done a blue toned light fur for my Nords, and similarly I have kind of this more blue green fur that I've done on one of the Nord units. Sort of could do something like that, but maybe a little bit more lighter in tone, just to give it a little bit of a pop. And it kind of feels like someone who is a commander would want to show off that they're not afraid of getting dirty or bloody, even though they've got a very light fur. I'm starting with the cloth. And why the cloth? Well, there's a couple of reasons. Firstly, I know how I want to paint this. So I always find it's good to start with something you are confident about. The second reason why I'm starting with the cloth is because, well, I want it to be a feature, which means I'm going to balance the rest of the colour scheme around it. So next I moved on to painting the armour. And something I did with this was I mixed in a little bit of blue-green into the metallic colour to give it a slight shift to a blue without it being too over the top. And you'll see in a moment that when I do my highlights and shadowing, I add some blue-green further into the shadows and recesses. And then I add a more yellowy green highlight, and it creates this really interesting hue shift effect. It's a bit hard to see the effect on the model, so I've put my main metal colour against a silver in the middle, and then the highlight colour I used is on the right. You can see a little bit more of the hue shifting that I've done. So I ended up going with the light blue fur as it ties in with the armour and brings a little bit of interest and balance to that purple cloth. Fairly early in the painting process, I like to paint the skin because the colours you choose for the skin can really affect how your colour scheme looks. So if you need to make any changes to your scheme, you're better to do the skin early and adjust it as you go through. From here, once I've got the key details in that I've been wanting to paint, I focus on balancing the colour scheme and the tones in the model to just create a more aesthetically pleasing balance. I decided that the model was looking overall too light, and so I wanted to add some depth into the scheme. I went with a deep teal as it already ties in with the blues that I've got going in the fur and the armour, but the depth of it is going to help ground the colour scheme. I really want the armour and the fur and skin to be the brightest parts of the models. So this is why I'm focusing on bringing in depth into the colour scheme to bring the overall tone from a medium light to a darker scheme. And I'm bringing this into some of the details as well, like the leather. You have to remember that you don't have to do materials the correct colour. You can create the effect of it looking like leather as long as you paint it texturally correct. So in this case, I did a lot of stippling on the leather to give it that proper worn leather effect. Hey, baby. Oh. Hey. I've really only got the small details left and the basing, and I was not looking forward to doing the basing. I went through probably almost all of our Geek Gaming base ready mixes trying to find one that I liked that fit with the colour scheme and tonally worked with what I had in mind. I did eventually find one that I think works and dove into painting the final details like the chest. This is also another place where you can bring in some of the colours in your colour scheme and make it still work and look like the texture you're wanting to go for. With this chest, I ended up going for a slight purple undertone to the wood, and it still looks like a wooden chest because the texture is correct. And with that being done, let's take a look at the final result.